With the Chiefs and the Niners playing in the Super Bowl, there's one style of a team versus another style of team. And the Steelers are trying to be one of those styles. But is that the right way? We'll talk about that with Josh Taylor here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Go play daily fantasy sports on PrizePicks right now by going to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Josh Taylor. You can see him on KDKA TV. You can hear him on 93.7 The Fan. He's everywhere. He has been on the show a little bit. He's been doing the dadly duties. We've been letting him do that, but we're happy to get him back. Josh, how you been, my man?
Doing all right, man. We are we have an official caller in the house. My daughter's almost 9 months old. She is mobile. She is everywhere, and she's driving my wife crazy, probably at the current moment. But yeah, we got two that are mobile, and one's trying to catch up with the other one, and she probably will in due time. Outside of that, just trying to enjoy the downtime in between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. Looking forward to this matchup. I think it's going to be good. So it'll be a fun weekend.
Absolutely. Let's dive into two things here. We won't talk about the Super Bowl too much. I was using that to kind of cue up our point here. The point, though, is that this year, the signing of Arthur Smith is another commitment towards being a team that we talked about them being last year that's going to run the ball, control the clock, base themselves off of that, use play action, use passing, use the run to set up the pass, and play that style of way instead of trying to either turn their quarterback into a superstar or going and getting a superstar. And the question I think that everyone's kind of wondering right now, is that the right way to build your team? Because if you look at the Niners and the way they're built, that's how they're built. Brock Purdy, for as good as he's played, he's a game manager. And that's not a slight to him. It's a rational point that he is a game manager. He's not a guy that makes plays outside of the structure of the play and does insane things to make things happen for the 49ers, whereas that's who Patrick Mahomes is. Now, I will say Patrick Mahomes has kind of dialed that back this season because the Chiefs' defense has been really good. But to me, the Steelers getting Arthur Smith is another sign that they want to be a strong team that can run the ball, call play action, and establish that identity. Well, they wanted to be that team last year, Josh. They really didn't become that team until the last 2 months or so when they, from week 10 on, they had the second most rushing yards in the NFL. The question is, though, is that still something that they should be trying to do, or are they missing a step here for what it takes to be really good in the NFL or to win a Super Bowl in the NFL?
I think it's what they should try to do because that's what they're best suited to be right now. I mean, we love to talk about what this team isn't and what this organization isn't and what this roster doesn't have. But we don't try to focus on what this roster does have. Or we try to conflate what this roster has to make it bigger than what it is, as opposed to looking at things for what they are and what they could be. I didn't mind the hiring of Arthur Smith. I shouldn't say I didn't mind it because I did think it was a good move, but I didn't hate it as much as some other people did because everybody talks about what they want this offense to be, what kind of numbers they should put up or how many touches this guy should have. That's a lot of fantasy football and bad gamblers talking. If you're talking about winning football games, your team should be based on what you do well. Your team should be based on what your roster is built for and what they're able to do. And the truth of the matter is this roster has a really good set of running backs in Najee Harris and Jalen Ward. They've got a capable tight end in Pat Freiermuth who can make plays in the passing game, especially in the middle of the field. Down that middle third, he's dangerous there. He's really good in the red zone. They got a couple of really good receivers in George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Johnson's a really good possession guy that can really hurt teams short and intermediate. And Pickens is a guy who can beat teams deep, but he can make plays in short and intermediate too. So they have a lot of different things they can use. But what's the one thing that joins them together? The ability to do all of those things within a certain flow. And that certain flow for this team, for this roster, and specifically for this quarterback. And by this quarterback, I mean Kenny Pickett, if that's what we're assuming going into next season. The best way to have that flow work is to use your running game as the conduit to work to everything else. If teams are going to look to try to take away George Pickens, fine, run the ball. If teams are going to try to pack in to run the ball, fine, use play action to set up the pass, but find ways to make defenses identify what they're going to do and then dictate what you're going to do. I think something that really gets lost in the shuffle this past season was, yes, the Steelers had a really strong run game the second half of the season, but one of these particular instances when their run game was really efficient was when they could do it out of 11 personnel or against light boxes and nickel and dime situations where they could just line that group up and run the ball, whether it was with Jaylen Warren or Najee Harris. But they had success when they can spread teams out and run the ball, but they could also bring guys in and still run the ball. But if you're able to do that of 11 personnel, it makes it a lot more hard for defense to decide where they're going to run it, they're going to pass. Who's the ball going to and who do we stop?
Well, so this is my question I had for you, and I brought this up last week on my show, but 12 personnel isn't something the Steelers really use that much. They were 24th in usage last year, and 12 personnel is when you bring in 2 tight ends, have 2 wide receivers, and a running back. And Arthur Smith, that's what he does. The Falcons used 12 personnel more than anyone in the NFL last year. And in the 2 years he was with the Titans, they were in the top 5 in both years in usage of it. They were also the best running team in either of those years out of 12 personnel. They got those kind of numbers. And that's where I look at it. And I'm like, man, if the Steelers if they can get 12 personnel humming the way the Titans did back in 2019 and 2020 when Arthur Smith was their OC, that could be a big ticket because, like you said, teams, if you can't figure out that, oh, they're definitely running the ball, definitely throwing the ball, because Pat Freiermuth's become a better blocker, which I think he improved last year. He still needs to make more improvements. But Darnell Washington, he's already a good blocker, but can he develop more skills as a receiver? And then you have Pickens and Johnson and either Harris or Warren. That, to me, if you can get an offense that it doesn't just live in that, but have that being a big feature of your offense to keep personnel packages tough for the defense to figure out because they don't know who can cover your tight ends with their athleticism or stop the run with the physicality, that's the kind of mix that you want to have. And I think that that's something they can definitely use in their favor to, one, make things easier for the run game, but then 2, if the run game's humming, make it easier for Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, whoever your quarterback back is next year, to have better throwing situations.
This is where I give a shout out to our little mini sickos committee when it comes to this team. You guys know who you are. Where we talk about how, trying to get both tight ends involved in this offense and running the football, and Darnell Washington being involved, and Broderick Jones being this road grading mauler. That group of us that wants to see this happen, we hear this and we get excited because that's what we want to see. Because we think, and it's not just because it's what we want to see, but it's also because we think this is what this offense is very suited for. This offense can be really good in 12 personnel. It can be really good in 11 personnel too, don't get me wrong. But 12 personnel is where this team could really give teams problems. And I'm glad you brought up the Falcons and what they've done, but there's a couple of other teams that were really good at it. Let's go back to New England 10, 15 years ago. The height of that time in Tom Brady when that offense was that unstoppable, a lot of it was because they can go 12 personnel and do so many different things with that personnel and line guys up in different places where you didn't always know what New England was going to do. You didn't always know where the ball was going. And another example I'll give is San Francisco. They do it a lot with 21 personnel. They'll do it with 2 running backs, a tight end, and 2 receivers. And they got guys lining up in different places where you don't know who's going where and you don't know where the ball is going. And it allows them to run the ball. It allows them to pass the ball. They can even work play action in. They use different things creatively with motion, and it allows them to be a lot more unpredictable and harder to stop. And if you do that with this team and you have the elements to do it, just find a way to tie it all together, and it makes it a much more complicated offense.
It does. I want to talk more about what the Steelers should prioritize with this draft class, with free agency, all here on the next segment of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Josh Taylor. Stick with us. We still got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by DoorDash. Why root for your favorite team or watch the Super Bowl on an empty stomach? Order on DoorDash and save on your football watch party favorites like pizza, wings, burgers, anything that you can imagine that they can be delivered to you. DoorDash probably has right? They can get it right to your door. Like me, might get some Big Shot Bots wings, might get some Permani sandwiches, all different things, Pittsburgh staples that you can get right to your door. If you're not in Pittsburgh, guess what? DoorDash is wherever you are, so they'll find you your local favorites. And right now, DoorDash will get you 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23, subject to change, terms and conditions apply. If you want even more value, you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. You can get prepared before game day, stock up on whatever you like, whether it's the food from your favorite restaurant or from a food that you want to prepare to make your favorite meals for yourself and your friends. DoorDash is always the option. And remember, you can get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order at DoorDash. Just download the DoorDash app right to your phone. When you do, enter the code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED 23. Subject to change, terms and conditions apply. We're also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. You're not battling against thousands of other players. You're not going up against pros and sharks. You're just going up against PrizePicks because PrizePicks has set projections for all the players out there. And if you see players that you think you have a beat on how they're going to play in a game, all you have to do is look at that PrizePicks projection, say it's going to be more or less than their projection. If you're right, your winnings will start to roll in for you. PrizePicks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. They even have a specials league that you can take advantage for Super Bowl weekend, where you can combine football players and basketball players for combined points. For example, if you think that Travis Kelce and LeBron James will combine for over 10.5 combined receptions and 3-pointers this weekend, you can say more or less, and you can watch your winnings happen on PrizePicks. PrizePicks also offers a reboot policy where your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games, you can get a player. If your player exits the game because of injury in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. So download the PrizePicks app today or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Josh Taylor. We're talking all things Steelers. So, Josh, let's look at a few things here in the draft and what the Steelers need to do to be the kind of team that they want to be, to compete with the Chiefs, teams like the Chiefs, teams like the Niners, teams that make it to the Super Bowl and are in those conversations. And let's be clear, the Steelers made the playoffs this past year. They've made the playoffs 3 out of the last 4 years. It's clear they can get there, but they have to be very good at something. They were good at running the ball at one point this season. They have to be good. They have to be great at that. They were good at playing defense. They have to be great at that. And I think that's where the tricky part about building what this team is right now. You have strengths. Offensive line is kind of a strength, but it's not an elite group yet. The defense, they are definitely a strength in that they are their 6th best scoring defense in the NFL, but questions in the secondary. Who plays next to Minkah Fitzpatrick? Can you get Minkah Fitzpatrick back to being an X factor? Who lines up next to Joey Porter Jr. at the cornerback position? What are you going to do on the defensive line? There's questions there. And the question that I have for you is, what should be the biggest priority? If you were to pick 3 priorities right now that this Steelers team has to achieve in free agency and the draft, so giving you a lot of space to do this, what are those priorities? And if you could name, you don't have to name them all in the order that they are the priority, but if there's one above the other 2, which one is that?
Oh, the one above the other 2 for me is offensive line. I said that going into last year in the draft, and I have the exact same feeling going into the draft this year that I did last year. Last year, my kind of wish list, what I wanted going into the draft, I wanted 2 of their top 3 picks to be an offensive and defensive lineman. And they did exactly what I hoped they would do. So I kind of got what I wanted there in terms of Broderick Jones and Keanu Benton. And both of them, by the way, have worked out very well. I'd like to see them do that again this year. I'd like to see 2 out of those top 3 picks, one be an offensive lineman and one be a defensive lineman. If you want to run it back again with that 3rd out of the 3 being a corner, I'm not going to tell you no. If you want to make that 3rd pick a wide receiver, once again, I will not tell you no. But if you want to make that third pick a linebacker, I by well no means will argue with you. I think that will be another addition as well. But for me, this team has to get better up front. It made a stride or two last season. I'm not going to sit here and say they didn't, because I thought they did as far as the offensive line play and the growth of a Keanu Benton. I thought was really helpful for this team. But if they're going to get to what you're talking about, to where they need to be great at a thing or two to get past that first playoff matchup, then there needs to be some work on the offensive line done. I would like to see that happen. If I had to pick between what particular position, I'd really like for it to be a center. I think it's time for them to really prioritize that position again. And on the defensive side, I would prefer it to be an interior guy, because I think it's time to continue to prioritize that position. That's where I would go with that. As far as that third position, it could be corner, it could be linebacker, it could even be strong safety. If we really want to get into the nitty-gritty of trying to have a more concentrated long-term approach to that position, strong safety, I wouldn't argue with either.
I agree that is certainly something the Steelers need to look at, is strong safety, and I've talked about that a little bit. I think this is also a good safety class for when you want to get those guys, because if you look at the guys out there right now, there's no safety that I feel is like going to fly off the board in round one, but there's plenty of guys who on day two who I think would be very interesting picks. You got a bigger guy in Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. He's 6'2". He could be an interesting guy. I really like Cameron Kinchins out of Miami, Javon Bullard out of Georgia, Tyke Smith out of Georgia, Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. All of those guys that if they got in the second, third, or maybe even the fourth round for Hicks, because I think that there's some people that rank him down as a day 3 pick, that those are athletic young guys you can add to your team and make an asset. You look at how Antoine Winfield has worked out for the Buccaneers. He's become a superstar safety for them. And I'm not saying they need a superstar next to Minkah Fitzpatrick, but if you can get a really good, talented athlete to play strong safety, to be a factor there next to Minkah Fitzpatrick, that can be the factor that can really make sure the middle part of your field is locked up, backs up your linebackers really well, and is a big answer there. But corner is also a big need here, in my opinion. And we'll get to the trenches in a bit here. But, you know, you look at the corners this year, I think this is a really good corner class. You know, you got so many guys that are first round grades, either Cooper DeJean from Iowa, Nate Wiggins of Clemson, Quinion Mitchell of Toledo, Kool-Aid McKinstry or Terrion Arnold, both of Alabama, Kamari Lassiter of Georgia. All of those guys could fly off in the first round, and that could make for an interesting pick there. But last year they waited on corner and got Joey Porter in the second round. They could do similar things there. But I think that the thing that you're talking about here is very interesting, is the trenches still having to be the priority. And in my opinion, if you want to improve the trenches and you're not getting a starting center or a starting tackle in free agency, those two things have to be done in the first and second round, because Jackson Powers-Johnson is shooting up everyone's boards right now. And with him shooting up everyone's boards, he might not even be available at their 20. I just saw a mock draft where he was picked 16 by the Seahawks. And if he's not there, I say, hey, go get, as long as one of those top tier tackles are there, guys like Talais Fuaga, JC Latham, Amarius Mims, get, Tyler Guy, one of those guys, that'd be worth it, as long as you can make sure that you find a way to get Zach Frazier as your center in the second round. You get a mix of those two types of players, I think you're speaking well. And even if you get Jackson Powers-Johnson in the first round and come back and say get a Patrick Paul or a Graham Barton or a Kingsley Suamataia in the second round, you're addressing that offensive line, and you're saying this offensive line will become, in the next couple years, one of the best, if not the best, offensive lines in football.
I thought they were trying to send that message when they brought in Broderick Jones. I think they brought it in like, look, we're trying to turn this into a much different group. It doesn't have to be just big and strong. It can be big, strong, and athletic. And if you're Broderick Jones, you got a serious, attitude to you. And I keep coming back to that game against the Titans, that Thursday night game, where Mike Tomlin goes over to Broderick Jones after that first drive, and they just run the ball down Tennessee's throat. And you just hear Broderick Jones going all game. And Mike Tomlin's like, say it again. There is clearly a shift toward what they want to do up front and how they want to do it. You rattled off a lot of names. I heard a few Georgias in there, by the way. Mm-hmm. I keep my blanket policy of insert at least one Georgia guy here, because that's another one of the things that's like permanently on my list now. Get me at least one Georgia boy and I'm happy. But if you can get a group of linemen, especially if you can get two in the first 3 rounds of this draft, I'm not going to argue with you. But if you can get that kind of lineman that you're talking about, that could be physical and that could be dominant, but could also be athletic. And you talked about hiring Arthur Smith. what does he like? He likes big, strong, physical offensive linemen that can move because they have to be able to move in the run game. So if you can find that, it's going to be an immediate upgrade, not only the immediate upgrade from a physical standpoint, but it's going to be a better fit for what Arthur Smith wants to do with this offense, particularly not just running the ball, but passing the ball as far as pass protection as well. All of those things become important.
I agree. It's one way to address to make that, again, you want to make the offensive line not just a strength, but a dominant strength. Like you look at the Niners, their offensive line can kick a lot of butt.
Trent Williams is the best lineman in the game, in my
exactly. You imagine if this team, if the Steelers had, like, imagine if Jackson Powers Johnson is the center the way that Creed Humphrey is for the Chiefs, and imagine if the Steelers Broderick Jones and say they get another tackle in this class, and and they're not as good as Trent Williams, but as a duo they're dominant, and then you still have Sayamalu and Daniels in between them, good veterans who can set the tone. That could be the perfect mix to be the team that controls the line of scrimmage and play that not just the old school style of Steelers of football, but also the more modern way of, hey, you want to control the line of scrimmage to make things easier. Because listen, as much as people think that it's all about air raid and just spread them out and throw the ball all the time, that is how so many teams are winning right now. That's what got the Eagles to the Super Bowl last year. It's what made the Ravens good, I think, this year in a lot of ways. Outside of having Lamar Jackson, of course. It's what helped the Lions be who they were with Penny, with Sewell and with Ragnow at center. They again, center tackle,
Greg Ragnow, Woo Pig.
Arkansas guy here.
They got a couple Arkansas guys. Don't leave out Dan Skipper. They bring him in that big set too.
There we go. We got to get our Arkansas shout outs here. But point being, there are plenty of teams that win this way, and I do think that with the hiring of Arthur Smith, you almost have to follow through to become that team, so that next year you're giving yourself the best chance to be one of the better ones at doing that, and that gives you the best chance to win.
You can't discount the fact when you're looking at the four teams that played in the conference championship games. Like, just put it down to Baltimore, Kansas City, and San Francisco and Detroit. All four of those teams had really good, if not dominant, offensive lines. People love to talk about Detroit's offense, and I know it's about the offensive coordinator because he was such a hot name, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is my favorite family of wide receivers. By the way, the St. Browns are just fantastic. But the thing that really held it all together was that offensive line. They very seldom had a bad game. They very seldom had a bad series, and they very seldom had stretches where they weren't moving bodies, because they were doing it consistently. And they still have guys like Taylor Decker that you don't hear a lot about. These are high pedigree guys that they brought in. Penei Sewell, high pedigree guy. We talked about my two Arkansas guys being high pedigree guys, but these were dudes that were brought in specifically for one job: move bodies and get them out of the way. So you could have guys like Montgomery, and you could have your running backs making some of the plays that they made in Detroit because it made it so good. And that's what happened with San Francisco. We talk about Trent Williams being one of the best linemen in the league. They let Mike McGlinchey go, and it didn't matter in San Francisco because that offensive line play was so good. Kansas City, we've seen it for a few years now. You mentioned Creed Humphrey as much as the other guys on that line. And it also, Baltimore, I thought, was a team that really elevated his offensive line play, because you saw it in the pass protection for Lamar Jackson, but you saw it in the run game as well. And it showed in the numbers. And this is coming back to the four teams in the conference championship games. 3 of them were in the top 5 in yards per carry. The only one that wasn't was Kansas City, and they were 13th at 4.3. So even when you want to talk about an offense that can do a lot of things on the outside of the field, that's great. That's all well and good. You want to talk about a quarterback that can make plays outside of the flow, that's all well and good. But none of it matters if you don't have the offensive line to make it work on either side of the spectrum.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about how that kind of a team competes with other teams in the NFL, and give our final grades and our final grades of the season, going over the specialists and how they graded out this year. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, Locked On Steelers. Stick with us. Still a lot to talk about. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Sometimes we all need opportunity to get things off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let those things out, especially just someone unbiased in your life, like a good therapist. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking the same thing this week. You probably aren't, because you unlike me, are having to deal with all the Taylor Swift jokes. Actually, you probably are. So you know what? And it's not even Taylor Swift. I like Taylor Swift. I like that she's enjoying the cheese. I like that she's because that people are mad about her. But you know what I'm not liking? I'm not liking all the bad puns that everyone makes, Josh. I don't like that everyone keeps saying "Shake It Off" and names every song in a show. I get it. You think you're funny, but you're not. So stop doing it because it's driving me nuts. And it's making you go talk to my therapist at BetterHelp Therapy online. Go to BetterHelp Therapy right now, and you can find the person that helps you get the worst things off your chest, which are a lot deeper and more serious than your favorite sports team or your least favorite sports topic that's just now about a singer because she's really popular. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, that's why you got to give BetterHelp Therapy a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible around your schedule, and that can be done easily by visiting BetterHelp.com/lockedon, and you'll get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Josh Taylor. Josh, I want to talk about the team, the type of team the Steelers need to beat these teams. We've been kind of circling around it. We've talked about it a good bit, but I still want to go at it and say, like, okay, if the Steelers are going to again compete with them, we can say add to the offensive line and get another quarterback and all these other things. We can talk about this stuff as much as we want, but the fact is they still have to find a way to win these games, and that's where I think there's going to be some people out there that are kind of like, I don't buy it yet. I still want to see them get over the finish line of winning a playoff game. And I hear that. I understand that. But I think the Steelers, if they do the things that we're talking about them needing to do, I think that they can put themselves in these conversations that can make them a better team that can compete with these other squads. You look at the teams that were top 5 in running the ball from, again, that period where the Steelers were really good this past year at running the ball from I think it was week 9 on to week 18. Steelers ranked second in overall yards. I think that in yards per game, they were like 3rd or 4th, but the teams around them were the Ravens, the Niners, the Bills, the Lions, all teams that if the Steelers could get those kind of results, people will be a lot happier about the direction that they're going. I think that certainly you want to run the ball better, but the question is, what else do they have to do to compete with other teams at a better rate? And is that something that if they address it right in this offseason that they could be at next year? Or is this another year to set up a future year, Josh? Because I think that's what people are tired of hearing. They're tired of hearing about, the year after this is the year, which I even said, like, listen, I think they'll make the playoffs this past season. I said they'll probably make the playoffs, but I don't see them being Super Bowl contenders just yet. What is it going to take to stop that kind of talk and say, okay, they are a contender?
It's going to take quite a few things. The one thing that is the obvious thing is that we talked about already. It's the play in the trenches, and that's on both sides of the ball. That's something that's going to have to be consistently better, I think, on a week-to-week basis. The other things I think that are important, really, and a lot of it is, it's more day-to-day. It's more, can you be the team that's more consistent and makes fewer mistakes? Because the thing that really caught up with this team, especially the really bad losses that they had, the playoff game where I thought it became a problem, it's just unforced errors. Can you control the unforced errors that you make? Can you control, losing the football? I mean, this team had this really big problem of holding on to the football in that playoff game against Buffalo. Then you saw where, you had certain things that snowballed. You had one bet play here, and it would snowball into a couple other plays otherwise. You saw it a couple times, like I want to say it was in the game against Cincinnati or a game against Cleveland with Deontay Johnson, that play, and that kind of snowballed. And you see other plays on defense where they begin to snowball. Can you be more consistent on a week-to-week basis in doing the things that you are allowed to do that prevent those unforced errors? But more importantly, and this is something that, you hear it tossed around back and forth, and I think they look at it the wrong way. I know a lot of people talk about quarterback play as it being the pinnacle number one thing. I don't think it's a pinnacle number one thing, but I do think it's a big foundational thing. And it doesn't have to be superstar level play, but could it be competent level play? An average level of quarterback play for this offense would have made it one of the top half offenses in the league. All it needed was average level quarterback play. All you need is just competent quarterback play. I hear a lot of people talking about how Kenny Pickett needs to be able to do this and how an offensive coordinator has to help Kenny Pickett do this. The next offensive coordinator, and I hate putting everything on offensive coordinator, but the next team of offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, whoever they may be, you know what their goal should be? Is telling Kenny Pickett, look, every time you get to the line, just make sure you do your job well. Whether it's reading this play to get the ball in this short yardage or getting it in this particular yardage play to move the chains on a third down or just handing the ball off well, just knowing what to do and where to do it and what the extent of your job is. If they can get that more controlled, I think a lot of these other problems probably smooth themselves out because now you're not pressed into a situation where, okay, we can't call this play because we know he can't do this, or we know we can't do this because this is lacking, or we know we can't do this because this is lacking. The true nature of what this offense was versus what it should be wasn't on who the offensive coordinator was. It was on what their limitations were and what they couldn't do consistently. And part of that, a big chunk of it, was the lack of consistent quarterback play. For me, if you take that and round that off, it makes this offense look a lot better because consistent quarterback play, you're probably going to get better production from your wide receivers. Consistent quarterback play is going to open up opportunities for your run game. Consistent quarterback play is going to keep your defense off the field, and you're going to have longer drives that might result in points. So if there really is that thing, I won't say it's the thing that needs to be the top priority, but it's the thing that's sorely missing. It's just competent, consistent quarterback play. You don't have to be top 5. You don't even have to be top 10. Just be consistent in what you do and make sure you get the job done.
I agree. To be consistent in what you do and get the job done. Quarterback play is going to be very important. It's not necessarily going and getting a superstar quarterback. It's getting your quarterback to understand what the scheme is and coach them into saying, hey, go through these reads, take these options, and trust the system that you're best being put in place. And you got to trust that Arthur Smith will have that system put in place. So we'll have more discussions about this as time goes on. But when we're talking about consistency, we have to get to our final grades on the Steelers specialists this year. And as always, we go over, these are the last group of players that we have to give our final grades on. As always, throughout the season, after every game, players either got a 1 to a 3-star grade or a 1 to a 3-star grade or a 1 to 3 skull grade. Stars being good, skulls being bad. And then at the end of the season, we total them up and give you their final grades. And if there was one player who was the most inconsistent player on the team this year, it was Presley Harvin, who finished just with 8 stars, 12 skulls, and I think he's the first ever player in my grading history to give 2 bus ticket grades to Alan Saunders. And listen, there was a point this year where I think it started with the first Browns game and then the Raiders game where Presley Harvin was punting the ball, and it was like, oh snap, did he figure it out? He might have. And it was by mid-season, all of that progress went away. And as much as people have been rooting for Presley Harvin, he was a great college punter. He won the Great Guy Award. Had a very tragic rookie season in the NFL, losing 2 close family members in like a span of a week. As much as you want to root for this guy, the Steelers have to move on from him. You can't, especially with the style of team that they're trying to build, you need to at least have an average punter. You can't have one of the worst punters in the league. And unfortunately, for Presley Harvin, that's who he is right now.
Yeah, I think parting ways would be good for both parties in this particular situation. I think the Steelers need more consistency for sure from the punter position. And Presley Harvin just might need a change of scenery. And sometimes this is, one of the unfortunate things. Maybe things don't start out on the best of notes, and then you're spending the rest of that time just trying to catch what you were always trying to be at the beginning, and you never really get there. And it feels like a carrot being dangled in front of Presley Harvin that he's just not going to get to. But maybe a change of scenery allows him to kind of reset mentally and be able to probably get back into a possible routine of what he was doing well to become successful. Because I don't think it's not completely lost that he might be able to be a serviceable punter somewhere else. I don't still know if it'll ever be here. So I can totally agree with that.
I'm right with you there. One guy who hasn't been inconsistent for quite some time, and that's Chris Boswell. On the year, finished with 22 stars, 1 skull, an A grade by and large. And listen, I think the only years Chris Boswell ever struggles is when he's dealing with an injury, and I think he was dealing with an injury. I think there's been 2 years where he's had like a lower than 80% rate kicking the ball. But all the other times, he is cash money when it comes to being a kicker. And this year was another one. On the season, he was 21 of 39. That's good for a 93.5 rate. Last year, he was 71.4. The 3 years before that, he was in the 90s% there. Right now, career-wise, he's 87.2. He's been elite. As long as he doesn't get hurt, I think Chris Boswell is still cash money. You keep him around at all costs.
Yeah, I've been making this case for a while that when it comes to kickers in the league, like it's Justin Tucker 1, Chris Boswell is 1A, and then there's everybody else. Now, granted, McPherson in Cincinnati is a guy who's I think has really built up a good resume, and Fairbarn is a guy who's really catching people's attention too for being a pretty solid kicker. But still, for my money, Justin Tucker and Chris Boswell, I don't think you can lose either way. I think you'd be crazy to try to suggest that anything less of what we've seen from Chris Boswell isn't among the best kickers in the league.
Absolutely. Those are our specialist grades, and those are all of our final grades. Thank you for everyone who's been tuned in all season long for our final grades and our grades all throughout the season. But we still have a lot more to talk about. What's up?
No long snapper shout out? No Christian Kuntz shout out?
We do not.
No love for the Duquesne guy? Come on,
nope,
Chris.
not at all. I'm not grading long snappers.
Shout out to Christian Kuntz. It's a good day to be Duquesne Duke.
Hey, great. Christian Kuntz, heck of a job. Do you think, man? But we are not. If I have to, because the only time he would only get bad grades, because you're not getting the 3-star grade for just doing your job. That's why I feel it's unfair to grade long snappers in the way that we do. But he's Josh Taylor from 93.7 The Fan and KDKA TV. Josh, let me know I can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Social media, pretty simple. Josh Taylor HD. That's Facebook. That's Twitter. That's Instagram. I'm pretty sure that's TikTok. That's all of the places, and that's the best way to do it. On the TV side, CBS Pittsburgh. That's where I am mostly on weekends. 937thefan.com. Also on the Odyssey app, or of course you can listen to the Locked On Steelers podcast. You can listen to me there too on weekends on 937 The Fan. I have this guy on a lot too. We talk a lot of football and college basketball and stuff. So all the more reason to check it out because you get more of Chris along with me too.
Absolutely. Check Josh out and all of his things. He's amazing. We love having him here. We'll have him back again very soon. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday, talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily episodes. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, rate us 5 stars with a positive comment. You do both at the same time. You get a shout out at the end of the show. We're back tomorrow with Wes Euler of Steeler Nation Radio. We'll see you then right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.